Naomi Bloom used to believe that a home was a place where your voice grew stronger, not quieter, but that belief slowly faded the day she moved into the pale blue house on Linden Street with her husband, Victor Bloom, and his mother, Mrs. Irene Bloom. On her first morning there, sunlight poured through lace curtains, and Naomi stood in the kitchen stirring oatmeal for her young daughter, Lila, while her son, Noah, tapped a spoon against the table, humming a tune he made up on the spot. Victor leaned against the doorway, smiling, and said, "You'll get used to my mother. She just likes things her way." Naomi smiled back, thinking it was harmless. When Irene entered, her heels clicking sharply on the floor, she looked at the pot and said, "That's too watery. Lila will never grow strong on food like that." Naomi's hand froze around the spoon. "I thought it might be easier for her to eat," she replied gently. Irene sniffed and turned away. That small moment planted a seed of doubt in Naomi's heart, though she didn't know it yet. Later that day, she whispered to Victor, "Did I really do something wrong?" Victor shrugged. "You're too sensitive, Naomi." His words felt light, but they landed heavy, and Naomi began to wonder if maybe her feelings were the problem, not the way she was being treated. Days turned into weeks, and the house filled with quiet rules Naomi never agreed to, but somehow followed. Irene corrected the way she folded towels, the way she braided Lila's hair, even the way she laughed at Noah's silly jokes. One evening, as Naomi set the table for dinner, Irene leaned close and said, "In my day, women knew how to keep a home without making it look so messy." Naomi looked around at the clean counters and shining plates and felt her chest tighten. At the table, Victor spoke about his job, and Irene nodded proudly, while Naomi tried to join the conversation. "I was thinking of applying for a part-time course," Naomi said softly. "Something in art or design." Irene laughed, a sharp sound. "That's not practical. Victor needs a wife who thinks about the family, not silly dreams." Naomi looked at Victor, hoping he would defend her, but he only said, "Maybe Mom's right. Now isn't the time." That night in their bedroom, Naomi asked, "Do you really think my dreams are silly?" Victor turned away and said, "You're overthinking again." Naomi lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around her, and wondered when she had started feeling like a guest in her own life. The children began to notice the tension before Naomi admitted it to herself. One afternoon, Lila tugged on her sleeve and whispered, "Grandma doesn't like you, does she?" Naomi knelt down, forcing a smile. "Of course she does, sweetheart. She just shows it differently." But the words felt thin. That evening, Noah dropped a glass, and it shattered on the floor. Irene's voice rose like a storm. "See what happens when there's no discipline in this house." Naomi rushed to her son, hugging him as he cried. "It was an accident," she said. Victor sighed loudly. "You're always making excuses for them." Naomi's heart thudded in her chest. "They're just kids, Victor." Irene crossed her arms. "And you're too soft. That's why they don't listen." Naomi wanted to shout, to defend herself, but instead, she nodded, feeling smaller with every word. Later, she sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to Victor, "I feel like I'm disappearing." He frowned. "You're being dramatic." Naomi looked at her reflection in the mirror, at the tired eyes and the forced smile, and wondered if maybe she really was becoming invisible. One rainy afternoon, Naomi met her old friend, Mara, at a small cafe near the park. The smell of coffee and warm bread wrapped around them as they sat by the window. "You look exhausted," Mara said, studying her face. Naomi laughed weakly. "It's just the kids, you know." Mara leaned closer. "Is that all?" Naomi hesitated, then words spilled out like water from a cracked cup. She talked about Irene's comments, Victor's silence, the way she felt wrong in her own home. Mara listened, eyes soft. "Naomi, that doesn't sound normal. That sounds like they're breaking you down." Naomi shook her head. "Victor says I'm too sensitive." Mara reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Being sensitive means you care. It doesn't mean you deserve to be hurt." Those words stayed with Naomi as she walked home in the drizzle, holding her jacket tight around her. When she opened the door, Irene looked up and said, You're late. Dinner's cold. Naomi took a deep breath and replied, I needed some air. Irene rolled her eyes. Victor didn't look up from his phone. For the first time, Naomi felt a small spark of anger beneath her sadness. That spark grew into a quiet fire over the next few days. Naomi began to notice how often her voice was dismissed, how often her feelings were brushed aside. One night, after the children were asleep, she sat across from Victor at the kitchen table. I'm not happy, she said, her hands shaking. Victor frowned. What now? Naomi swallowed. I feel like I don't matter in this house. Your mother criticizes everything I do, and you never stand up for me. Victor pushed back his chair. You're making problems where there aren't any. Naomi stood too, her heart pounding. There are problems for me. Irene's door opened, and she appeared in the hallway. What's all this noise? Victor said, Naomi's upset again. Irene sighed. You see? Always causing drama. Naomi felt tears rise, but she didn't let them fall. I'm not causing drama. I'm asking to be treated with respect. The room fell silent. Victor looked at her like he didn't recognize her. In that moment, Naomi realized something had changed. She didn't feel small anymore. She felt tired of being quiet. As she went back to the bedroom, she looked at her sleeping children and whispered to herself, I have to be strong for you. That night, Naomi began to imagine a life beyond Linden Street, a life where her voice could finally be heard. Naomi began to move through the house differently after that night, as if she were walking on the edge of a decision she hadn't yet spoken aloud. In the mornings, she packed Lila and Noah's lunches with extra care, slipping little notes into their bags that said things like, I love you more than the sky, and be brave today. Irene noticed, of course. Why are you wasting paper on childish scribbles? She said one morning, lifting one of the notes between two fingers like it was something dirty. Naomi took it back gently. Because my children like knowing they're loved, she replied. Victor looked up from his coffee, surprised by the firmness in her voice. You don't have to turn everything into a statement, he muttered. Naomi met his eyes. Maybe I do, she said, and walked away before her courage faded. That afternoon, she took the children to the park, watching them run under the wide, open sky, and felt a strange mix of fear and hope flutter inside her chest. She imagined a small apartment filled with laughter instead of criticism, with warmth instead of tension. The thought scared her, but it also made her breathe easier than she had in months. The first real crack in the fragile peace came during a family gathering. Victor's relatives filled the living room, their voices loud and cheerful, plates of food balanced on their laps. Naomi stood in the kitchen, helping Irene serve, when she overheard her mother-in-law say, Naomi tries, but she's never been very good at keeping things together. Laughter followed, light and careless. Naomi stepped into the room, her face burning. If there's something you want to say about me, you can say it to me, she said, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. The room fell quiet. Irene raised her eyebrows. I was only joking. You really can't take a joke, can you? Victor shifted uncomfortably. Mom didn't mean anything by it. Naomi looked around at the faces staring back at her. Jokes aren't funny when they make someone feel small, she said. She took Lila and Noah by the hand and led them outside, breathing in the cool evening air as if it could wash away the sting of the moment. That night, Victor confronted her in their bedroom. You embarrass my mother, he said, closing the door behind him. Naomi folded a shirt slowly, choosing her words. She embarrassed me first. Victor threw his hands up. You're tearing this family apart. Naomi's chest tightened. I'm trying to hold myself together, she replied. He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. You've changed, he said. Naomi nodded. I had to. She sat on the bed and let the weight of the day sink into her bones. Victor turned away, leaving the room without another word. Naomi lay back, staring at the ceiling again, but this time she didn't feel invisible. She felt like someone standing at the edge of a door, hand on the handle, ready to open it. Mara became Naomi's anchor in the weeks that followed. They met in the park, on the phone late at night, in whispered conversations that felt like stolen moments of freedom. You don't have to decide everything today, Mara told her one evening as Naomi watched the sun sink behind the trees. Just remember you have choices. Naomi repeated those words in her head like a quiet prayer. Choices. The idea felt both terrifying and powerful. At home, Irene's comments grew sharper, Victor's patience thinner, but Naomi's heart felt steadier. She began to set small boundaries. Please don't speak to me like that, she said one morning when Irene criticized her in front of the children. Irene scoffed, but Naomi didn't back down. For the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in her mother-in-law's eyes. The breaking point came on a stormy afternoon when thunder rattled the windows and rain poured down like the sky itself was angry. Noah came home from school in tears, his backpack soaked. Grandma said I'm just like you, he sobbed. Naomi's heart cracked open. What does that mean? She asked gently. She said I'm too soft and that I'll never be strong. Naomi felt something inside her snap, not in anger, but in clarity. When Victor came home, she stood in the living room, rain still dripping from her hair. This stops now, she said. Victor frowned. What are you talking about? Naomi's voice didn't waver. The way your mother talks to me, the way you let it happen, the way it's starting to hurt our kids. Irene appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. I was just teaching him the truth. Naomi shook her head. No. You were teaching him to be ashamed of who he is. The room filled with the sound of rain and heavy breathing. Victor looked between them, caught in the middle. Everyone's overreacting, he said finally. Naomi laughed softly, a sound without humor. That's what you always say, she replied. She walked past them, into the bedroom, and began to pack a small bag. Her hands moved on their own, folding clothes, tucking in the children's favorite toys. Lila stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Are we going somewhere? She asked. Naomi knelt and brushed her daughter's hair back. We're going somewhere safe, she said. Victor followed her, his voice rising. You can't just leave. Naomi met his gaze. I can, she said quietly. For the first time, Victor had no answer. They left as the rain began to soften, the air outside cool and clean. Mara's car waited at the curb, headlights glowing like a promise. Irene stood in the doorway, her face tight, but she didn't say a word. Victor hovered behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes full of something that might have been regret. Naomi buckled Lila and Noah into their seats, then turned back to the house on Linden Street. It looked smaller now, less powerful. She took a deep breath and got into the car. As they pulled away, Naomi felt tears slide down her cheeks, not just for what she was leaving, but for what she was finally choosing. Mara's apartment was small but bright, filled with plants and the smell of fresh paint. It's not much, Mara said, setting down their bags, but it's yours for as long as you need. Naomi hugged her, gratitude swelling in her chest. The children explored the space, laughing as they claimed corners for themselves. That night, they ate pizza on the floor and told silly stories until Lila fell asleep in Naomi's lap. Naomi looked around at the simple room and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. In the days that followed, Naomi began to rebuild her life in small, careful steps. She found a part-time job at a local library where the quiet shelves and friendly smiles made her feel steady again. Lila and Noah started at a new school, nervous at first, then excited as they made new friends. One evening, as Naomi helped them with homework at the tiny kitchen table, Noah looked up and said, "You smile more now." Naomi paused, then smiled even wider. "Do I?" she asked. "Yeah," Lila added. "You look like you're not scared anymore." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were warm, not heavy. Victor called a week later. Naomi watched his name glow on her phone before answering. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. Naomi closed her eyes. "It went this far because it had to," she replied. He was quiet for a moment. "Mom misses the kids," he said. Naomi took a breath. "I won't keep them from you," she said. "But things have to be different." Victor sighed. "I don't know how." Naomi's voice was gentle but firm. "Then you need to learn." She ended the call with her heart pounding, but she felt strong for having said what she needed to say. Weeks turned into months, and Naomi found a rhythm in her new life. Mornings were still early, but they were filled with laughter instead of tension. The children helped water Mara's plants, arguing over whose turn it was. Naomi started sketching again in the evenings, her old love for art slowly coming back to life. One night, Mara looked over her shoulder and said, "You're good at this." Naomi smiled shyly. "I forgot that I was." One afternoon, Victor came to visit the children at the park. He looked tired, older somehow. As he watched Lila and Noah play, he turned to Naomi. "I didn't see what was happening," he admitted. Naomi studied his face. "I try to show you," she said softly. He nodded. "I know." The air between them was heavy, but it wasn't hostile. It felt like the quiet after storm. They talked about school, about schedules, about small, practical things, and when he left, Naomi felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Irene never apologized, but she grew quieter in the background of their lives. Naomi heard her voice sometimes on Victor's phone, sharp and familiar, but it no longer reached into her home. The distance felt like a shield. Naomi realized that peace didn't come from changing other people. It came from choosing where to stand. On a warm summer evening, Naomi and the children sat on the steps outside Mara's building, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Lila leaned against her, and Noah pointed at the clouds, making up stories about shapes and heroes. Naomi listened, her heart full. She thought about the woman she had been on Linden Street, quiet and unsure, and the woman she was now, steady and awake. She whispered a promise to herself that she would never again let her voice fade into the background of her own life. Years later, Naomi would tell this story not as a tale of escape, but as a story of becoming. She would say that strength didn't arrive all at once, like a sudden storm, but slowly, like the sunrise, light spreading across the sky until you could finally see where you were going. And as Lila and Noah grew, they would remember not the house they left behind, but the courage their mother carried forward, the way she taught them, by example, that love should never make you feel small, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to choose yourself. Time kept moving forward, even on the days Naomi wished it would slow down, so she could catch her breath. One crisp autumn morning, she walked Lila and Noah to school, their hands tucked into the pockets of their jackets, their laughter puffing into the cold air like little clouds. As they reached the gate, Lila suddenly stopped and said, "Mom, do you think Grandma Irene still thinks we're too soft?" Naomi knelt down in front of her, brushing a leaf from her daughter's hair. "I think some people don't know how to see strength unless it looks like theirs," she said gently. Noah frowned. "So, what does our strength look like?" Naomi smiled. "It looks like kindness. It looks like trying again when things are hard. It looks like standing up for yourself and for each other." The children nodded, as if storing those words somewhere deep inside. As they ran off toward their friends, Naomi stood for a moment, feeling both proud and achingly aware of how much growing they had all done together. That afternoon, Naomi received a letter in the mail with Victor's handwriting on the envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it, half expecting old arguments to spill out in ink. Instead, she found careful, uneven lines. "I've started seeing a counselor," he wrote. "They say I need to learn how to listen instead of defend. I don't know if it will change anything between us, but I wanted you to know I'm trying." Naomi read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it in her sketchbook. When Mara came home from work, Naomi handed her a cup of tea and told her about it. Mara raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel?" Naomi thought for a moment. "Hopeful," she said slowly, "but not responsible." Saying it out loud felt like another small victory. Naomi's art began to find its way beyond the walls of Mara's apartment. The library where she worked offered her a small corner to display her sketches, and people stopped to look, to smile, to ask questions. One elderly woman pointed at a drawing of a mother holding two children under a wide sky and said, "That one feels brave." Naomi laughed softly. "It is," she replied. That evening, Lila and Noah helped her hang a new piece in the window, their fingerprints smudging the glass as they worked. "We're famous now," Noah declared. Naomi pulled them both into a hug. "We're just sharing our story," she said, her heart swelling at the thought of how far they had come. Winter brought quiet moments and long nights, but it also brought warmth Naomi hadn't known before. They decorated a small tree in the corner of the living room, each ornament holding a memory: a paper star from Lila, a painted rock from Noah, a ribbon Mara tied around the top like a bow. One evening, as snow fell outside, Victor came by to drop off gifts for the children. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hands in his coat pockets. "They look happy," he said. Naomi nodded. "They are." There was no bitterness in her voice, only truth. Victor hesitated, then said, "So, do you?" Naomi met his eyes. "I am," she replied. And for the first time, she believed it without doubt. On the first morning of spring, Naomi woke to sunlight spilling across the floor, painting everything in soft gold. She made breakfast while the children slept, humming a tune Noah had once invented at the old house, but now it sounded different, lighter. When Lila and Noah joined her at the table, she looked at their bright faces and felt a deep, steady peace settle in her chest. Naomi knew her life would never be perfect, that there would be hard days and difficult choices ahead, but she also knew something stronger than fear lived inside her now. As they stepped outside together, the air fresh with the promise of new beginnings, Naomi took a deep breath and smiled, ready to keep walking forward, carrying her story not as a wound, but as a source of strength.